And everybody in the courtroom just fell down in gales of laughter. And so I did have the presence of mind of saying to the judge, you know, Your Honor, why don't we just go ahead and sentence him to the 4 months, and give him credit for the times he's already spent in the jail, and then he can go home and support his wife. No, he'll just have to serve out his full term. Well, that's the way, that gives you the atmosphere of Orlando, Florida, back on October 6, '58. One other story along the same lines is that I later volunteered went to the criminal court of record judge who was a successor to Judge Murphy. And I offered at that time to represent anybody charged with any crime. And on short notice, I didn't care what it was, you can call me and I'll come over there and do the best I can. So one day he called me at 9 o'clock in the morning and said, can you be over at 9:30? And I went over there at 9:30, and I was to defend the fellow who was being charged with robbing a store. So the judge suggested we do the voir dire before we actually started the trial, and had me pick the jury without knowing any facts at that point in time. But after the voir dire was over with, then he allowed me to have 25 minutes with him to find out whether or not he robbed the store or what other facts were. And so I put him on the stand. And so he testified he didn't rob the store. And so during his stay on the stand, I referred to him as Mr. And the judge summoned me up to the bench and said, you best call him Sammy, his first name. And I said, well, yeah, I reckon so. Why do I have to do that? She said, well, if you want to get an acquittal here, you need to call him by his first name. Well, I proceeded to call him by his first name. And the jury did find reasonable doubt, and he was acquitted. And by the way, years later, he came to me at the Fishbach, Davis, Dominic, and Troutman firm where I went after I was through with Ackerman. And a gentleman came in to see me for some legal advice, and I didn't recognize him, but it was Sammy. And Sammy had some legal advice he needed from me. And I said, by the way, Sammy, what do you do now? He said he was an orderly at Orlando Regional Hospital. And so I felt very good about giving Sammy a second choice about that. Now that gives you a little bit of atmosphere. It's not a pretty picture, but you asked me what the differences were in Orlando then and Orlando today, and I don't think I could be more graphic in describing to you the differences than the two stories I've just told you. Otherwise, let
me move to Jim Rush for a minute, because I want to change streams a little bit here. Jim, as Woody noted earlier, you have received the highest award for pro bono of anybody in the state with the Tobias Simon Award. In this matter. Talk to us a little bit about the most memorable pro bono experiences you've had and the effect that doing pro bono has had on you as a lawyer in Central Florida.
Well, I'll have to tell you a couple stories, I guess.
You understand why Jim Russ, after listening to Russell Troutman, why Jim is doing criminal law and Russell is doing civil law now.
This goes back to about 1970 when Reuben Askew was elected governor of the state of Florida. Either shortly after the election or early into '71, he was the governor and Bob Shevin was the attorney general. Well, there was a disturbance at the prison at Rayford. It just started out, it was a nice day like it's probably going to be today, and the prisoners were out getting some fresh air, and they got time to go in, and they didn't want to go in. So that upset the management, and the next thing you know, they're out there with guns and billy clubs, and they did a lot of damage, including shooting one man whose name was James Peoples so that he lost his eyesight. Well, I think it was probably through the ACLU that I got involved in that case. It was a real upset in the Gainesville, Stark area, and Gainesville lawyers were involved. And so we started a civil rights lawsuit in the federal court in Jacksonville. And we used the name of Peoples against Wainwright, not only because James Peoples had this serious loss, but also it seemed like a very attractive title to lawsuit that was going to go on for a long time, which it did. Needless to say, we had a lot of resistance from the management at the prison to get in any type of communications with, even with the clients. They were reading our mail back and forth to the point that we had to go to court and get a court order to stop them from reading attorney-client mail. And to make a long story short, once we got over the emotional stuff and the thing settled down, we just spent years kind of just doing nothing. The judge, who I won't name, didn't want to proceed with the case, so he wouldn't say anything. And it just went on for years, and then in time we got a new judge, and she was more interested in resolving this matter. So after about 10 years total litigation, we finally settled the money damages part of the case for, I think, 30 or 40 prisoners, some of whom had been released, so we didn't even know where to send the check to, but I think the total came out to about 100 grand. So I realized that doesn't sound like a heck of a lot of money for 30, 40 people getting beaten up and losing their eyesight, but at that time it was quite a victory in terms of bringing law and order to the prison system, bringing justice to the prison system, and we certainly got the attention of the management.
Jim, you have been very successful in the criminal practice. You've done a lot of pro bono. You've got a lot of young lawyers here. Why is pro bono important? Why should they personally, other than the fact that they're required to do it by the Orange County Bar, why do it? What's the benefit to you or to the practicing lawyer?
Well, we're talking about the selfish interest?
Whatever you think.
Well, it's taken from the selfish interest. I think that every young lawyer, well, that's an overstatement. Many young lawyers are anxious to get into the courtroom and get into the give and take of litigation, and the opportunities don't come up that easily, particularly in the early years of practice. You're there essentially doing the research, writing the papers, handling motions and hearings and that kind of stuff, so it's hard to get that trial experience. When I got elected the prosecuting attorney for Orange County, Florida in the fall of 1960, I think I had maybe about 3 jury trials. So I certainly wasn't an experienced lawyer to take that job. But I certainly got a lot of experience in that 4 years. I tell you, that was a 7-day-a-week job. And all the people and all the custodial people in the courthouse knew Jim Russ, and I knew every janitor by name because I spent 7 days a week down there. And I sure tried a lot of jury cases. But that's one selfish aspect of it, just to get the experience. And in the pro bono work, say within the Legal Aid Society, you're going to get a range of it, of a civil nature and a domestic matters, which brings you closer to a lot of the problems of our society that flow from family life. I think that it's the criminal experience, once you get into it a little bit, the court-appointed system that we have, particularly in the federal system, gives that opportunity. So I think that that's one, from the point of view of selfishness, is your professional development and getting that experience that you're not going to get waiting for the phone to ring or even getting a billboard out on I-4.
Russell, let me ask you, everybody knows you, everybody knows the Legal Aid Society, but I don't know whether they all know that you were instrumental in getting it started. Talk to everybody for a second about the importance of the legal aid, the importance of pro bono, and any memorable case that you can, if you can pick one, if you had to pick one to talk about it.
Well,